The air is thick with the weight of summer in Alabama, the kind that hums with insects and memory. A single photograph lies on a desk beneath a slanted beam of late afternoon light. Edges curled, colors faded. The moment it captures both ordinary and impossible. Children grin for the camera in mismatched camp shirts. Counselors squint against the glare, and behind them a lake ripples with sunlight. It looks like any other photograph from 1991. Another snapshot of innocence and laughter from a world that believed every story ended in safety. But then, there's the boy. He's standing slightly apart from the others, face half turned toward the camera. His expression isn't joy, it's stillness. Almost like he doesn't belong in that second of time. Nobody saw him then. Nobody even noticed him when the photo was pinned on the camp's corkboard, passed through hands, or scanned for newsletters. For 25 years, the image slept quietly in a cardboard box labeled Everpine Summer 91. It waited. When the photo reappeared, it was by accident. A researcher digitizing old camp files paused, zoomed in, and froze. There were 21 children registered that summer, but 22 faces looked back from the photograph, and the extra face didn't match any name. The camp roster, the police reports, even the town archives, all denied his existence. Yet there he was, caught in a single frame, a shadow of someone who shouldn't be. As the camera pans closer, the voiceover lowers, soft, deliberate, almost confessional. It doesn't describe the boy, not yet. It describes the feeling of realizing that the world you knew, the stories you told yourself about childhood, safety, and time, were never as sealed as you thought. That maybe, somewhere between light and memory, something was left behind. The narrator speaks of the Alabama heat, the cicadas that never stopped screaming, and the way the lake reflects the sky like a mirror that remembers everything. There's a tone of grief that doesn't belong to a single person. It belongs to a place that forgot what it had seen. The scene lingers on that photograph. The children's smiles flicker in the projector light. Each face carries a glow of a life that moved on, graduations, weddings, mortgages. Except one face that remained exactly as it was, untouched by time, trapped in the quiet frame of a mystery that no one thought to ask about. The voice asks a question, not to the audience but to the universe itself. How many ghosts live in photographs we never really look at? As the music swells, something slow, fragile, and aching, the story sets its rhythm. It isn't about crime. It isn't about monsters. It's about memory, about the weight of what we don't notice until it's too late. The narrator promises no answers, only a journey, a descent into the forgotten corners of one long, hot Alabama summer, where truth hides behind sunlight and water, and where a single photograph became the whisper of something that refused to be erased. The frame fades to black, but not before the faint outline of the boy's face lingers a moment longer than it should, as if he's waiting for the story to begin again. The summer of 1991 arrived like a breath held too long. The mornings were already warm by the time the first buses rolled into the dirt parking lot of Camp Everpine, their wheels kicking up clouds of red Alabama dust that hung in the air like smoke. Parents waved through the windows, voices full of cheerful warning. Write letters, be good. Don't forget sunscreen. The forest around the camp seemed endless, the trees rising like old sentinels, branches whispering secrets in a language only the wind understood. Inside, counselors hustled to organize bunk lists and name tags. The camp had been running for decades, a local tradition known for lake swims, ghost stories, and church songs that echoed through the trees at dusk. Everything about it felt simple, wholesome, safe. Kids unpacked their duffel bags, taped family photos to cabin walls, and tested the squeak of their bunk beds. The smell of pine resin and sun-warmed wood filled the air. To any outsider, it was a picture of an American childhood summer. Innocence caught in the golden hour. Among the campers was a group of friends from Montgomery, kids who had grown up together and knew how to make the forest theirs. They spent their first days laughing, daring each other to swim out farther than the others, sneaking candy into cabins and whispering stories after lights out. There was a boy named Eli Turner, quiet, thoughtful, the kind of child who listened more than he spoke. He carried a sketchbook everywhere, drawing the lake, the trees, even the counselors who pretended not to notice. His eyes always seemed to wander beyond the horizon, like he was looking for something the others couldn't see. The camp's director, Pastor Ray, was a man who believed deeply in the idea of redemption through nature. He'd rebuilt the place after a storm tore through it in the late 70s, and he often said the woods had a memory of their own. In the evenings, he would stand at the edge of the fire pit, telling stories that mixed faith and folklore until the lines blurred. The children laughed at first, but the laughter always faded when the night grew still. Somewhere out there, past the lake's shimmer, the forest pressed closer, black and watchful. Letters from that summer, preserved in family boxes and old postmarks, painted a vivid picture of days filled with sunlight and games, but threaded with small unease. One girl wrote to her mother about strange noises in the woods after dark. Another said someone had been knocking softly on the cabin doors at night. Counselors brushed it off, just stories, just kids trying to spook each other. But some campers began waking in the middle of the night, swearing they'd seen movement beyond the window screens, shapes pacing between the trees. One afternoon, the camp photographer, a young volunteer with a bulky camera, gathered the children by the lakeside dock for a group picture. The laughter felt forced that day, as if something invisible had shifted. The sunlight came and went behind clouds. The wind picked up just enough to make the water move in odd patterns, and Eli was the last to join the group. In the photo, he's near the back, slightly apart from the others, a look of mild distraction in his eyes, as though something across the lake had caught his attention. The days that followed blurred together in a sequence of games, chapel hours, canoe races, and restless nights. The woods around Everpine were dense enough to swallow sound. When someone screamed or laughed, it disappeared into branches before it could echo back. Counselors began to notice animals behaving strangely. The raccoons stopped scavenging near the mess hall. Birds didn't sing in the mornings the way they used to. By the second week of camp, whispers had spread. One counselor told another she'd seen footprints near the lake at dawn, bare, small, leading nowhere. A maintenance worker claimed to have found a wooden cross floating upright in the water, tethered by reeds. No one wanted to mention it in front of the kids, but the tone of the camp had changed. The nights grew heavier. The cicadas screamed louder. The forest no longer felt like a backdrop. It felt like a presence. The moonlight fell in harsh silver streaks across the cabins, making the shadows seem alive. Even the lake stopped reflecting cleanly. Its surface turned dark, thick, like something looking back. Still, the counselors smiled through it. The parents' weekend was approaching, and everything had to appear normal. The children rehearsed songs. The cooks prepared for a barbecue, and Pastor Ray prayed longer than usual before bedtime. He told the campers that fear was just the devil's echo, but that didn't stop the feeling, that sense that something unseen was moving among them. The summer of '91 was supposed to be like every other summer at Camp Everpine. Sunlight and laughter and friendship. Yet underneath it all, there was a pulse, slow and quiet, building towards something none of them could name. The camera flashed that day by the lake captured more than smiles. It caught a moment before the air itself changed. No one knew that one of those children would vanish before the summer was over. No one knew that the photo they took, the one pinned on the mess hall wall for the rest of the season, would become the last time anyone ever saw him alive. And no one noticed, not then, that another face was already there in frame, standing quietly among them, watching. The night Eli Turner vanished began like any other. The final campfire of the week burned low, its smoke twisting into the warm Alabama air. The children sat cross-legged in a ring of light, faces flickering in the fire's glow as the counselors led them through one last song about friendship and faith. The sky was full of stars, the kind that felt impossibly close, and the lake shimmered quietly behind the trees. It was one of those evenings that seemed ordinary until memory reshapes it, until every word, every flicker of flame feels like a warning no one heard in time. Eli sat near the edge of the group, his knees drawn to his chest, his sketchbook resting against his legs. The counselors thought he was simply shy, but in truth, Eli had been distant for days. He'd told his bunkmates that he'd been hearing whispers near the lake after lights out. He said he saw someone standing across the water one night, someone who looked like him. The other kids laughed, teased him, called him Ghost Boy. But later, when they tried to sleep, they admitted they heard things too. Soft footsteps between the cabins, faint humming under the sound of cicadas. That night, Eli didn't sing. When the fire died down and the group began heading back to their bunks, he lingered. A counselor called his name, but he just nodded, pretending to tie his shoe. When the last of the campers disappeared into the shadows, Eli stood up slowly, glancing toward the path that led down to the lake. He seemed calm, almost certain, as if some invisible thread was pulling him forward. The moon was full, bathing the clearing in a cold white light. The lake lay ahead, still mirror-smooth, impossibly quiet. Eli walked barefoot, carrying his sketchbook at his side. A few campers later said they saw his silhouette passing between the trees, but in the confusion of bedtime, no one thought much of it. It wasn't until the next morning that they realized he never came back. The discovery came with silence. The counselors moved to the cabins at dawn, shaking shoulders, calling names. Eli's bed was neatly made. His shoes were gone. His sketchbook lay open on the pillow, a drawing of the lake unfinished. Half-complete ripples trailing off into blank space. Panic rose fast. The camp director ordered a search. Counselors fanned out through the woods, calling his name until their voices cracked. The sheriff arrived by noon, followed by volunteers and dogs. The search lasted for days. They dragged the lake twice, found nothing. No footprints beyond the dock, no torn fabric, no signs of struggle. It was as if he had stepped into the night and dissolved. The official report labeled it a probable drowning, the kind of phrase that makes adults feel like they've done their part. But no one believed that. Not really. The water was calm, shallow near the shore, and Eli had been a strong swimmer. Some whispered that he'd run away. Others said he'd fallen, hit his head, drifted out. But in private, among the counselors who'd been there that night, a different story circulated, one that no one dared to say aloud. They said someone else had been near the lake, a shape seen through the fog, a second reflection in the water beside Eli's, a shadow that moved differently, like it didn't belong to the boy at all. The camp closed early that summer. The buses came 2 weeks ahead of schedule, and parents arrived with tears and questions no one could answer. The counselors were told to speak carefully to the press, to say that Eli's disappearance was an unfortunate accident. The local paper ran one headline, "Boy missing from summer camp. Search continues." By the end of August, the story had already faded to the second page. But for the families, for the kids who were there, the silence never left. Some of them had nightmares for years, dreams of standing by the lake, hearing someone call their name in Eli's voice. One girl swore she saw him once, years later, in the background of a family photo taken at a park 2 towns away. She said he was smiling, wearing the same shirt he'd worn that night. No one believed her, of course. In the months that followed, Pastor Ray tried to keep the camp's reputation intact. He sent letters to parents, promising safety improvements, new lighting by the docks, more security patrols. But Everpine never fully recovered. The staff turned over, donations slowed, and by the next summer, fewer than half the usual number of campers returned. The woods seemed heavier somehow, the air different. For Eli's family, the years became a long ache of unanswered prayers. His mother kept his room untouched, sunlight frozen across the same unmade bed. His father spent weekends at the lake, watching the water for signs that never came. They buried an empty coffin 2 months later, a ceremony more for the living than the dead. Yet beneath the grief, there was something else, a quiet unease, the sense that the story wasn't finished. Even the sheriff, who'd written off the case, admitted privately that something about it didn't sit right. "There should have been something," he said later. "A shoe, a scrap of fabric. You don't just vanish." And so the summer of 1991 ended as it began, in heat silence and the hum of unseen things moving through the trees. The laughter that once filled Camp Everpine was gone, replaced by a story that no one wanted to tell, but everyone remembered. A boy had disappeared by the lake. No one knew how. No one knew why. But somewhere in a photograph taken just days earlier, his face was still there, frozen mid-smile, surrounded by friends who didn't yet know they were looking at a ghost. The file on Eli Turner gathered dust for years. Inside the metal drawer of the Pine County Sheriff's Department, the folder sat wedged between old burglary reports and water damage complaints. The paper had yellowed, The ink had bled faintly from Alabama humidity, and the name, Turner Elijah, was still written in blue pen across the front. Every few years, a new deputy would stumble upon it, skim the pages, and quietly slide it back where it belonged, into the drawer of things that time had decided to forget. The official case notes were thin. Missing person, 10 years old, last seen near the lake, probable drowning, no remains, no evidence of foul play. The conclusion came too quickly, wrapped in the comfort of finality that small towns crave. Pine County wasn't built to handle mysteries. It was built on the illusion that everything could be explained. After the camp closed that season, the sheriff, Ed Harlan, gave a short statement to the local paper. He looked tired in the photo, eyes sunken, shirt wrinkled in the August heat. "We did what we could," he told reporters. "Sometimes the world don't give us answers." His words became the town's mantra, repeated whenever someone dared to mention Eli's name. But behind closed doors, the search team couldn't shake what they'd seen or hadn't seen. Deputies who walked the woods swore that the night of the search felt wrong. Dogs refused to follow scent trails. Flashlights flickered inexplicably. A few men claimed they heard movement near the lake, but found nothing when they turned their lights toward it. There was talk of fog rising too quickly, of echoes that didn't match the direction of their voices. These stories never made it into the report. Sheriff Harlan ordered silence. "You start letting imagination take root," he told his team, "and this place will never sleep again." By September, the story had cooled into folklore. At the diner, people spoke about Eli's disappearance like it was a sad accident, but their eyes said otherwise. Some whispered that he'd been taken, that the woods behind Camp Everpine had never been right. A few mentioned an older counselor, Mark Latham, who left town suddenly after the incident. He'd been fired mid-season for behavioral issues, though no one ever clarified what that meant. Mark was last seen driving north in a rusted pickup, leaving behind an unpaid motel bill and a rumor that followed him for decades. The Turners tried to push for a deeper investigation. Eli's father wrote letters to state officials, begging them to reopen the case. He even visited the camp director, Pastor Ray, asking to search the ground again. The pastor refused. He said the land had been blessed and should be left to rest. His refusal only fueled suspicion. Over the years, fragments of unease drifted through the town. A maintenance worker who'd helped clean out the camp in '93 claimed he found children's drawings tucked under a floorboard in Cabin 7. Pictures of a boy standing alone by the water. Another said he saw shapes moving at the edge of the lake when he went to drain the dock lights one evening, though he blamed it on fatigue and bad light. Still, every time someone tried to reopen the discussion, they were met with polite resistance. The townspeople had learned to protect themselves through silence. They'd seen what happened to places that became known for tragedy. Pine County couldn't afford to be one of them. The economy depended on tourists and churches, not ghost stories. So the adults agreed without ever speaking it, that forgetting was easier than remembering. Pastor Ray continued holding services at the camp chapel even after the cabins began to rot. He told the congregation that faith could heal any wound, even one carved into a community's soul. But those who attended said his sermons changed. He started speaking in circles, quoting verses about the wilderness testing the faithful, about the dangers of looking backward. "The devil lives in memory," he once said. "He waits for the curious." Meanwhile, the sheriff's department quietly archived the file. New cases took priority. The disappearance became a ghost line in an old database, a name no one typed anymore. When Sheriff Harlan retired in '99, he handed the keys to his office to his deputy and gave only one piece of advice. Don't chase what's done. It'll only chase you back. The town moved on, as towns do. Children who'd attended Camp Everpine grew up, moved away, had kids of their own. Some refused to let their children attend summer camps at all. Others convinced themselves it was all a tragic accident. The forest grew thicker around the old property, swallowing the path to the lake. What was once a place of laughter became a hushed landmark, a shadow people pointed to from their car windows but never entered. Yet the quiet never truly left. On humid nights, when the wind came from the west, locals claimed they could still hear something faint drifting across the water, something that sounded like a child calling from far away. No one wanted to check anymore. It was easier to let the sound belong to imagination. By the early 2000s, the case was a story told to scare teenagers. The boy from Everpine became an urban legend. Campers dared each other to sneak near the lake at midnight, to shout his name into the dark. A few said if you called 3 times, you could see a ripple in the water, even when the air was still. But beneath the ghost stories lay a quieter truth, a system that had failed a family, a community that had chosen peace over truth. The official records remained untouched, the evidence never revisited. The faces of those involved aged, moved, died, taking their memories with them. By the time 25 years had passed, the world had changed entirely. The town got a Walmart, new subdivisions, a cell phone tower on the hill. Camp Everpine was sold, abandoned, and reclaimed by vines. The photograph, the one that captured all of them, smiling before everything fell apart, was stored away with other forgotten relics of local history. And yet, as years faded into decades, that single photograph remained the quiet proof that the story wasn't finished. Somewhere inside it, unnoticed, waited the evidence that the past wasn't gone at all. It was simply waiting for someone to look close enough to see what had always been there. In the spring of 2016, the boxes from Camp Everpine resurfaced by accident. They were found in the basement of the Pine County Courthouse during a renovation. Dusty cardboard containers marked archive, 1990 to 1995. Most were filled with dull administrative papers, budgets, maintenance, invoices, lists of camp supplies. But one box was different. Inside it were photographs, hundreds of them, faded, curled at the edges, their glossy surfaces clinging to each other like old memories afraid of being pried apart. Anna Reeves hadn't been looking for a mystery. At 29, she was a graduate researcher at Auburn University, studying how small towns documented loss. Her project was meant to be clinical, an examination of forgotten disappearances, the kind that never made national headlines. When her advisor mentioned Pine County's old camp records had been donated for digitization, she volunteered without hesitation. She liked order, structure, the quiet of archives. She believed that understanding tragedy helped tame it. The courthouse basement smelled of mildew and old paper. Anna set up a small scanner, her laptop balanced on a folding table, the light humming above her flickering in a rhythmic pulse. She worked methodically, one photo at a time, naming each file, checking the date, scanning the faces. Most were harmless snapshots of a bygone era. Kids canoeing, group sing-alongs, counselors in denim shorts and bright visors. She felt almost comforted by their simplicity, by how much they looked like the world before screens took over. Until she found the photograph. It was near the bottom of the stack, stuck to another print by age and humidity. The handwriting on the back read, Group C, Lakefront, August 12, 1991. She placed it under the scanner, pressed a button, and watched as the image loaded onto her screen. At first glance, it was ordinary, a group of 20-something campers smiling at the edge of the lake. She recognized the camp uniforms from earlier photos, the same wooden dock, the same worn canoe in the background. But then something unsettled her. There was an extra face. She couldn't explain why she noticed it. It wasn't obvious. The boy stood near the far right, half shadowed by a counselor's shoulder. His expression wasn't cheerful. It was vacant, distant. Anna leaned closer. The eyes were the first thing that struck her. They didn't seem to be looking at the camera or anyone else. They seemed to be looking through it. She checked the back again. 21 campers listed. But on screen, there were clearly 22 faces. She zoomed in. The boy's features were distinct. Dark hair, a striped shirt, a solemn mouth, but slightly blurred, as though he'd been caught in motion. And yet no one else in the picture was moving. Every other child was still, smiling, sharp. Only he seemed half real. A prickle of curiosity ran through her. She searched the camp rosters from that year, found the same names repeated across several group photos. But in none of them did that extra boy appear, except in this one. His name wasn't on any registration list, not in the counselor notes, not even in the attendance sheets. Anna checked the metadata. The date stamped on the photo matched the week Eli Turner disappeared. Her pulse quickened. She had read about the case before, one of many local unsolved disappearances filed under presumed accidental. She remembered the boy's name because it had appeared in an old article she digitized a week before. But what stopped her breath wasn't the connection. It was a detail that the article said Eli went missing 2 days before this photo was taken. She sat back in her chair, staring at the screen. The hum of the basement seemed to grow louder. She told herself it was a mistake, a mislabeled photo, a reused roll of film. Yet the more she studied it, the less certain she became. There was something off about the way the light hit that one face. The shadows didn't align. The reflection in his eyes showed something the others didn't. Something like water. That night, Anna took the file home on her laptop. She couldn't stop looking at it. Every few hours, she opened it again, zoomed closer, adjusting contrast and exposure, trying to explain the impossible. But each time, the boy's face seemed to change subtly. His eyes darker, his outline sharper, as if the photo was resisting her efforts to make sense of it. She began losing sleep. The image played behind her eyelids when she blinked. She thought about the kids in the photo, how some of them were likely middle-aged now, scattered across the country, unaware that their childhood smiles had captured something they couldn't see. Her curiosity turned to fixation. She tracked down old camp employees, scoured local records, and found fragments of what was left. A few newspaper clippings, a police statement, and a handwritten camp newsletter. Each piece mentioned the same thing, a tragic disappearance, a community shaken, a story that ended quietly. But none mentioned a group photo taken after Eli's vanishing. Anna began to feel as though she'd stepped into the space between two versions of reality. The official one the town remembered, and another that had been waiting hidden beneath the surface. She emailed her advisor, asking for permission to expand her research focus. "There's a case that doesn't add up," she wrote. "It's like time folded in on itself." She started to imagine Eli not as a lost boy, but as a moment, an echo left inside the camera, burned into light and paper, trapped in the geometry of memory. The thought both terrified and fascinated her. At one point, while staring at the photo late at night, she noticed something she swore hadn't been there before. A faint outline near the dock, a reflection in the water that resembled a second figure. She blinked, looked again, it was gone. By then, it wasn't just research anymore. It was personal. Anna felt the pull of the story in her bones, as though the photograph itself wanted to be understood, as though it had chosen her to finish what time had buried. She began to dream about Camp Everpine. Dreams of the lake shimmering under a full moon, of voices calling her name from the tree-lean. Each morning, she woke with the same sentence echoing in her head. "You didn't see me then, but I was there." That's when she knew, whatever the photograph was, whoever that boy had been, it wasn't finished with her yet. Anna Reeves had never been superstitious. She was the kind of person who trusted data more than instinct, who could turn fear into a research question. But ever since she'd found that photograph, her rational mind had started to feel like a thread pulled too tight, each day stretching it thinner. The more she stared at the image, the less sense it made, and yet she couldn't stop. She told herself she was searching for closure, but deep down, she knew she was chasing something she didn't fully believe existed. She began by tracking the camp staff. Some names were easy to find. Facebook profiles, local obituaries, LinkedIn pages that hadn't been updated in years. Most ignored her emails. A few responded with polite confusion. But when she reached Daniel Hurst, one of the junior counselors from the 1991 season, the tone shifted. He replied within minutes, his message short and nervous. "Please don't contact me about that summer. There's nothing left to find." Anna pressed him anyway. A week later, after several follow-up messages, he agreed to talk, but only over the phone, and only once, when she called. His voice was soft, trembling at the edges. He said he remembered taking that photo. He even remembered the day. "It was hot," he said. "Humid. The kids were restless. We just gotten word the search was over. Everyone was pretending to move on, but you could feel the air go strange, like the world was holding its breath." When Anna asked about the extra boy, the line went quiet for nearly a minute. Then Daniel said something that made her skin crawl. "There wasn't a 22nd kid. I swear to you, there wasn't." She pressed again, asking if he was sure. He laughed nervously. I counted them myself. 21 campers. One was gone, remember? There shouldn't have been any more. He paused, then whispered, You shouldn't have found that picture. After the call ended, Anna sat in silence, the hum of her refrigerator filling the room. She replayed his words over and over. There shouldn't have been any more. The photograph, though, didn't lie, or did it? She began analyzing the image pixel by pixel, running it through filters, light adjustments, even AI enhancement software. But the more she tried to define the boy's face, the more it resisted clarity. His features seemed to waver, almost as if the file was alive, subtly rewriting itself every time she opened it. She began keeping a notebook, documenting her findings like a scientist chronicling an infection. Each entry grew more fragmented, her handwriting less steady. Face slightly clearer today. Expression changing? Looks older? The notes became less about the image and more about how it made her feel. Something watching me from the edges of the frame. Her roommate, Lisa, noticed a change. Anna stopped sleeping. She started leaving the photo open on her laptop all night, the glow illuminating her face while she sat motionless in the dark. One morning, Lisa told her she'd walked past Anna's room at 3 a.m. and heard her talking softly to someone. You said, I see you now, Lisa told her, uneasy. Anna brushed it off as exhaustion, but a sliver of fear began to root itself deep inside her. She started dreaming about water, not the clear, still kind, but dark, heavy water that pulled her downward no matter how hard she tried to wake. In the dreams, she'd see the same boy from the photograph standing waist-deep in the lake, eyes open, waiting. Her research turned obsessive. She visited the Pine County Historical Society, searching for other group photos from the camp's earlier years. She combed through dusty binders of negatives, microfilm archives, and scanned footage from the local newspaper summer coverage. That's when she found something that made her blood run cold. The same boy appeared faintly in another photo from 1983. Same expression, same striped shirt. He looked exactly the same. Anna felt the room tilt. She checked the timestamps, the camera types, the names of the photographers. Nothing connected, no overlap, no reason that face should appear twice across a decade. When she brought it to the archivist, a kind older man named Howard, he frowned at her printouts. Honey, those photos weren't taken with the same camera, he said. Different years, different equipment. Probably a trick of light. But even he couldn't explain why. When he looked closer, the boy's reflection appeared in the water while the others didn't. Something inside Anna shifted that day. The project stopped being about verification. It became personal, a kind of haunting she couldn't rationalize. She started to feel as though the boy was following her through time, appearing at the periphery of her thoughts. Sometimes, while reviewing old footage, she'd catch a flicker at the edge of the frame, a shadow that looked human but wasn't quite. She reached out to Pastor Ray, now in his late 70s and living in a nursing home on the outskirts of Montgomery. He agreed to speak only once, warning her that some stories are meant to stay buried. During their meeting, his eyes wandered as if watching things only he could see. When she showed him the photograph, he went silent. His hands trembled. Then, without looking at her, he said, That boy never belonged there. He wasn't one of ours. But he kept showing up, and I asked what he meant. Pastor Ray's eyes filled with tears. You think time only moves one way, he said quietly. But sometimes it circles back on itself. Sometimes places remember what we forget. He refused to say anything more. That night, Anna drove back to her apartment with the photo on the passenger seat. The sky was dark, rain slicing through her headlights. She could almost imagine someone sitting beside her, a quiet presence, watching her from the corner of her eye. When she parked, she couldn't bring herself to look at the photo again. She left it face down on the table, but in the reflection of the glass door, she thought she saw movement, a faint outline, a child's silhouette standing behind her shoulder. Sleep wouldn't come. Her computer screen glowed softly in the dark. The scanned photo opened once more. For the first time, she noticed something strange. Each time she viewed it, the timestamp in the corner changed, as though the image itself was updating, rewriting its own creation date. She closed her laptop and whispered into the darkness, half a question, half a plea. "What do you want?" No answer came, only the sound of rain outside and the faint creak of water pipes. Yet, deep down, she already knew. The boy wasn't asking to be understood. He was asking to be remembered. And from that night forward, Anna stopped being just a researcher. She became part of the story. The next discovery didn't come through data or documents. It came through sound. It began with a single hiss, a faint distortion that emerged late one night as Anna cataloged her notes. She'd been trying to clean up the audio from an old home video file. She'd found among the camp's digital conversions a VHS tape labeled Camp Everpine, August 1991, Week 2. The handwriting was uneven. The ink faded almost to nothing. It wasn't part of the official donation from the courthouse. She'd stumbled upon it in a forgotten cardboard box behind a filing cabinet at the Pine County Library. Someone had slipped it in there decades ago, like they didn't want it found. When she first pressed play, the screen filled with static, that hazy blur of analog color that seems to breathe. Then the picture steadied. A handheld camera moved shakily across the campgrounds. Children's laughter bled through the low hum of cicadas. The date flashed in the corner, August 14th, 1991, 2 days after Eli Turner's disappearance. The footage showed nothing out of the ordinary at first. Counselors directing a canoe race, kids splashing each other, a typical summer scene. But as the camera panned, Anna felt an immediate unease. The color seemed too bright, the air too still. There was a subtle distortion near the edges of the frame, like the film itself was resisting clarity. She slowed the playback speed, leaning close to her monitor, heart thudding quietly. The camera turned toward the lake. In the distance, something flickered, movement near the tree lean, a silhouette too small to be an adult. The operator didn't seem to notice. The lens drifted away, caught the laughter of the children again, then swung back toward the water. And that's when it happened. For less than a second, the boy appeared. He stood at the edge of the dock, facing the camera directly. His face was pale, his hair dark, his clothes damp as though he'd just emerged from the lake. He didn't move, didn't blink. He simply watched. Then the screen jolted. An abrupt cut to static, a flash of distorted noise that made Anna flinch. When the footage resumed, the boy was gone. The camera had turned back to the crowd, none of the children reacting, none of the adults aware. Anna froze the frame, pulse racing. She replayed the sequence over and over, scrubbing to the same second again and again, but with each pass, the image seemed to degrade. The boy's outline blurred, faded, almost as if the act of watching erased him. She captured screenshots, printed them, pinned them above her desk. She zoomed in on his face until it pixelated, until all that was left were points of light and shadow, and even then, she felt like his eyes were still there, still meeting hers. Over the next days, she became consumed by the tape. She spent hours cleaning the audio track, adjusting frequencies, filtering background noise. Between the chatter and wind, she began to hear something faint, something like whispering. The first time she noticed it, she assumed it was interference. But as she isolated the channel, the whispers formed into patterns, rhythmic, almost like words underwater. At first, she couldn't make sense of them. Then, after looping the section repeatedly, a phrase began to emerge. Faint, hollow, but there, you found me. She recoiled from her desk, heart hammering. For a long time, she didn't move. The apartment seemed to grow smaller around her, the silence thick. Every instinct told her to shut it all down, to delete the files, throw the tape away. But something deeper held her there, that same quiet pull that had started with the photograph. The feeling that this wasn't discovery. It was communication. That night, she dreamed again. She was standing at the lake, moonlight cutting silver paths across the surface. She heard a voice, soft, distant, calling her name. When she turned, she saw a figure standing in the water, not a boy this time, but a reflection of herself, holding the same camera, the same trembling expression. She woke drenched in sweat, her throat dry as if she'd been calling out in her sleep. The next morning, she called Daniel Hurst again. No answer. Then she called Pastor Ray's nursing home. The receptionist told her he had passed away in his sleep the previous night. Anna's voice cracked. It felt like a line between the past and present had been severed the moment she touched it. Her laptop screen still displayed the paused frame of the boy on the dock. She noticed something she hadn't before, a faint reflection behind him, deeper in the water. Not a reflection of him, but of someone standing beside the camera, someone tall, holding their hand out. She checked the footage again. That moment shouldn't exist. The person's shadow didn't align with the light. The realization made her stomach twist. The tape wasn't just recording an event. It was recording something outside of time, something the camera shouldn't have seen. Anna started keeping her blinds closed. She stopped answering emails from her advisor, from her family. The only thing that mattered was the image, the sound, the impossible. The hum of her laptop filled the apartment like breathing. On the third night, as she reviewed the footage again, she heard something new. Right before the static hit, before the image cut to black, a voice, low, strained, but clear this time, spoke a single word. Wait. It wasn't Eli's voice. It wasn't a child's voice at all. Anna slammed her laptop shut and stumbled backward, gasping. The apartment was dark, except for the faint glow from the hallway streetlight filtering through her curtains. For a moment, she thought she saw something, her own reflection in the window, but not quite right. The posture was off, the head tilted slightly too far. Watching her, she whispered to herself that it wasn't real, that her mind was fabricating patterns from grief and fatigue. But when she opened the laptop again, the timestamp on the video had changed. It now read August 14th, 2016. Somehow, the tape had rewritten itself. From that moment, Anna understood that she wasn't uncovering history anymore. She was participating in it. The line between then and now had blurred completely. The boy, the lake, the photograph, the voice, they were all part of the same loop, the same echo trying to find a way back through time. And the terrifying truth that crept into her mind as she sat shaking in the dim blue light of her screen was this. Maybe she hadn't found the tape. Maybe it had found her. By the time autumn settled over Alabama, Anna's world had narrowed to two things: the photograph and the tape. Everything else, even her own life, had begun to blur around the edges. She stopped returning calls from her university. Her advisor left voicemails that began as polite concern and ended in quiet worry. She ignored them all. The mystery had swallowed her completely. The more she learned, the less she slept, and the less she slept, the more she began to see things that couldn't be explained. The decision to visit Pine County came after one final sleepless night. She couldn't shake the feeling that something in that town was waiting for her, something that had been patient for a very long time. She printed the photograph again, packed her camera, her laptop, and a small recorder, and drove through 6 hours of empty highway until the world around her looked like a memory. Wide fields, cracked signs, the smell of rain and red dirt in the air. Pine County looked smaller than she expected. A single main street, a handful of shops, a diner, and a church whose bell tower had long stopped ringing. She stopped for coffee at a gas station and asked the cashier if he remembered Camp Everpine. The man's expression stiffened. "That place," he said, voice flat, "ain't been there since I was a kid. You don't want to go poking around there." That was the pattern the entire day. Every time she brought up the camp, people turned cautious. Some pretended not to know what she meant. Others looked at her as if she'd said something obscene. One woman at the diner, in her 60s, leaned close and whispered, "It's not the camp that's cursed, honey. It's the water." Then she refused to say anything more. Anna booked a room at a small roadside motel. The wallpaper was faded, the bedspread thin. As the night deepened, the sounds of the forest pressed close. Crickets, wind, the occasional distant groan of what's settling. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. The photograph lay on the nightstand beside her, face down, but somehow she kept glancing at it anyway. The next morning, she drove into town and found the address of one of the former counselors she'd located in her research, Carolyn Tate, now 71. Her house sat on the edge of the woods, its porch sagging under the weight of years. Carolyn opened the door cautiously, her face sharp with suspicion, until Anna introduced herself and mentioned the photograph. The older woman froze. For a long time, she said nothing. Then, in a voice almost too soft to hear, she murmured, "You shouldn't have brought that back." Inside, the house smelled of cedar and dust. The walls were covered in framed photos of children and summer scenes, most of them, Anna noticed, from Camp Everpine. Carolyn poured coffee with trembling hands. "I took some of those pictures myself," she said. "That one by the lake. I remember that day clear as anything. But there weren't that many kids there. I swear to you, there weren't." Anna showed her the printout, pointing to the boy. "Do you remember him?" Carolyn stared for a long time, her lips pressed into a thin line. Finally, she said, "I remember thinking someone was standing behind me when I took that photo. I turned around, but there was no one there, just the trees. I told myself it was nerves after what happened to that boy." "You mean Eli Turner?" Anna asked. Carolyn nodded. "Sweet kid. Quiet. Always drawing. I helped search for him. We never found a thing. But that night, after the search ended, I heard something. Singing, like a hymn, coming from the lake. I never told anyone. I was afraid they'd think I'd lost my mind." Anna's recorder was running the whole time, but the audio picked up more than just their voices. It caught faint clicks and static, like interference, every time they mentioned the lake. When Carolyn noticed, she went pale. "Turn that off," she whispered. "He doesn't like being recorded." "Who doesn't?" "The boy," she said. "The one from the picture. He's been seen before." Anna leaned forward. "You've seen him?" Carolyn hesitated, eyes darting to the window. "Not since the 80s. Back then, it was just stories. Kids said they'd see a boy standing near the water after dark. Every few years, a child would disappear. They called it the camp curse. We told ourselves it was nonsense. But now," she trailed off, shaking her head, "you found proof of something we were all too scared to face." Anna left with her heart pounding. The town's silence no longer felt like ignorance. It felt like protection. Every person she met seemed to carry the same weight in their eyes, as if they'd all made a collective decision to forget. Even the sheriff's office clerk, when she requested access to old files, told her politely, "Ma'am, that file's sealed. Some things ain't meant to be dug up again." That night, she walked through the quiet streets of Pine County with her camera in hand. Streetlights buzzed overhead, flickering slightly. The town was empty by 9 p.m. Windows dark, doors locked. She passed a small churchyard and noticed something strange. A row of wooden crosses, older than the rest, their names worn away by weather. One of them, she swore, had the initials E.T. carved faintly near the base. When she looked closer, it wasn't there anymore. Back in her motel room, she downloaded her recordings. When she listened to her conversation with Carolyn, she froze. Just after Carolyn mentioned the boy, there was a faint voice layered beneath the static, a child's voice whispering, "I'm still here." Anna stopped the playback, heart hammering. She rewound, played it again, the same whisper. She checked the waveform on her screen. It was there, visible, real. She stared at it for a long time before closing her laptop and whispering to herself, "You wanted to be found." The next morning, she visited the town library again, hoping to find any last trace of the camp's history. The librarian, an elderly man named Harris, remembered her from earlier that week. When she mentioned Eli Turner's name, he sighed heavily. "You people never give that boy peace," he said. "We lost one of our own that summer, and the world forgot him. Maybe that's how it's supposed to stay." But then, as she turned to leave, he called out softly, "You should talk to the Thompsons. They used to own the land before the church bought it. Their family's photo albums go way back." The Thompsons lived on the outskirts of town in a small farmhouse surrounded by pines. The matriarch, a gentle woman in her 80s, greeted Anna with cautious kindness. When Anna explained her purpose, the woman's expression faltered. "You're not the first to come asking about that camp," she said quietly, "but you might be the last." She fetched an old photo album from a chest in the living room, its pages yellowed and curling. The photos dated back to the 1960s, early days of Camp Everpine, long before Eli Turner. There were black and white shots of groups of smiling children, counselors, bonfires. And then Anna saw it. In one of the oldest photos, 1974, a boy stood off to the side of the group, same striped shirt, same dark hair, same vacant eyes. Time hadn't touched him at all. Anna's hands trembled as she traced the image. The woman looked away, eyes moist with something that wasn't just sadness. "We used to say the land remembers," she murmured, "that some souls get stuck between the water and the trees. Maybe that boy was never meant to leave." When Anna left the house, the sun was setting, turning the sky orange and bruised. She drove back toward her motel, heart racing. The town, the camp, the faces, all of it was part of the same circle. Eli wasn't the first, and if she wasn't careful, she feared she might not be the last. In her rear-view mirror, as the light faded, she thought she saw something standing at the edge of the road, a small figure watching her car pass. She blinked and it was gone, but the reflection of her own eyes in the glass seemed darker than before, as though she was beginning to carry a piece of that place inside her. The people of Pine County had tried to forget for a reason, because remembering was how it began again. The days after Anna's visit to the Thompsons blurred into something between dream and fever. She no longer felt like a visitor piecing together fragments of history. She felt like someone being led by it. The pattern had begun to reveal itself, not through logic, but through rhythm. The more she dug, the more she realized the disappearances weren't isolated tragedies. They were a cycle, precise in their repetition, hauntingly methodical in their silence. Back in her motel room, Anna spread photographs, police notes, and her own transcriptions across the bed. The room was a mosaic of decades. Children frozen in time, smiling before they vanished. The boy appeared in all of them, always near the edges, always uncounted. 1974, 1983, 1991. 3 missing children, 3 summers, and one face that never aged. She pinned the photos to the wall in order, the years scrawled beneath each one in red marker. The timeline was almost perfect, each disappearance spaced exactly 9 years apart. She stared at the gap that followed 1991 and whispered, the next should have been 2000. But nothing was recorded that year. No missing persons, no headlines. The camp had already been abandoned. The pattern had been interrupted. Or perhaps, she thought with dread, it was simply waiting. Anna began to see the boy not as a ghost, but as something older, something that existed outside of time's flow. Maybe he wasn't haunting the photographs. Maybe the photographs were haunting him. Every time someone looked, every time a lens captured light from that lake, he reappeared, anchored to the act of observation itself. She tried explaining her theory aloud, recording herself on her phone. Her voice trembled as she said, "He's not in the photo. The photo is in him. Each picture isn't proof of his existence. It's a doorway. Every time it's opened, he moves closer to whoever's looking." She stopped recording midway through that sentence because she heard something faint, static from her phone speaker, layered with a whisper. She rewound. The recording now contained another voice overlapping hers, echoing faintly. "Don't look again." Anna's pulse quickened. She turned off her phone, unplugged her laptop, closed every curtain. But the sense of being watched didn't stop. It grew worse. When she tried to sleep, the motel walls seemed to pulse with sound. The pipes moaned faintly, like someone humming through them. And the dreams returned, always the same lake, always the same voice calling her name, each time closer. The next morning, desperate for clarity, Anna drove back to the ruins of Camp Everpine. The entrance was almost gone now, reclaimed by vines and moss. The wooden sign that once read "Welcome to Everpine" lay half buried in the mud. The air was thick with humidity and the faint scent of algae and decay. She moved slowly, filming everything. The cabins were hollow skeletons of what they once were. The walls had collapsed inward, graffiti covered what remained of the chapel, and nature had swallowed nearly all traces of human life. Yet, beneath the sound of her footsteps and the rustling of trees, she heard something else, a faint rhythmic splash coming from the direction of the lake. Her heart thudded painfully. The sound didn't belong here. She followed it down the slope, branches clawing at her arms, until the lake came into view. It looked smaller now, choked with reeds and still as glass. And there, by the shore, half buried in mud, she found something that didn't belong, a Polaroid camera. She picked it up carefully. The film cartridge was empty, but the plastic felt warm in her hands, as though it had been used recently. She looked out over the lake, the surface reflecting the gray sky. For a moment, she thought she saw movement, a ripple breaking the stillness, as if something just beneath the water was watching her. She turned away, trying to steady her breath, when her phone buzzed unexpectedly. A new photo notification. Confused, she opened a gallery app. There was a picture she hadn't taken, a photo of the lake from behind her shoulder. In the center of it, standing on the far dock, was the boy. Her throat tightened. The timestamp read 1991. Anna stumbled backward, phone slipping from her hands into the mud. Her breathing came fast, ragged. She picked up the device again and stared at the image, but now it had changed. The dock was empty, and her own reflection was visible in the water instead. The file name flickered for a second before vanishing entirely. Something inside her cracked then, not from fear, but from the weight of understanding. This wasn't about Eli Turner anymore. It never had been. The boy's appearances were tied to the land, to the act of remembrance itself. Every time someone tried to forget, he surfaced again through a camera, a mirror, a reflection, any surface that could hold an image. She drove back to town in silence, mud dry on her hands. That night, she printed out all the images she'd gathered, every version of the boy across decades. She laid them on the motel floor, connecting them with red thread. The shape that formed wasn't linear. It was circular. Each photograph fed into the next, looping back endlessly. It wasn't a timeline, it was a ritual. That realization hit her like cold water. Someone or something had been feeding this pattern for years. The camp wasn't cursed by accident. It had been built on a story that demanded to repeat itself, one of loss, remembrance, and return. Anna searched the town archives again, this time for the land's history before it became a camp. That's when she found a faded document from 1919, a church record describing the area as Lake of the Forgotten. It mentioned a flood that drowned an entire settlement of families and children. No graves, just names written in ink that had long since bled away. Beneath the record, scrawled faintly in pencil, was a single note. The water keeps what the earth won't. Anna closed her eyes, a sick realization settling in her gut. Every disappearance, every photograph, every whisper, none of it was random. The boy wasn't a ghost. He was the echo of all the children lost to that lake, the sum of their memory given form. Her reflection in the motel mirror caught her eye. For a second, she thought she saw someone behind her, a small figure, blurred, watching. When she turned, the room was empty, but on the mirror's surface, her own outline seemed to linger a heartbeat too long before following. She picked up a recorder, voice shaking as she whispered, "It's not the boy that's haunting the town. It's the memory of him. And memory doesn't die, it waits." Outside, thunder rolled in the distance. The wind picked up, and for a brief moment, Anna thought she heard a child's laughter carried through it, faint and sweet, like something long gone returning home. That night, as she sat alone in the glow of her laptop, her reflection in the dark window didn't move when she did. It just stood there, smiling faintly, waiting for her to look again. The storm came suddenly. A heavy wind swept over Pine County, bending the trees, scattering leaves across the cracked highway. The motel lights flickered twice, then went out completely, leaving Anna in near darkness with only the rhythmic flash of lightning from outside. For a long time, she sat by the window, watching the world dissolve into gray and shadow. It felt like the whole town had gone silent, as though it was holding its breath again, just like the night Eli Turner disappeared. Something inside her whispered that the storm wasn't just weather. It was memory returning. She gathered her things, her camera, her flashlight, the photograph, and her recorder, and stepped into the rain. Water soaked her jeans instantly. The air smelled of electricity and pine. The road to Camp Everpine had nearly vanished under overgrowth, but she knew the way by heart now. She didn't need maps anymore. The path was etched inside her, like something that had been waiting for her since long before she was born. The forest swallowed her within minutes. Rain fell in sheets, hitting the ground with sound like whispers. Her flashlight beam cut through the darkness, illuminating the skeletons of the old cabins, the rusted remains of swings, the sign that still read Mess Hall half buried under moss. Every structure she passed felt hollow, drained of time, yet something about the place felt alive, pulsing faintly beneath the thunder. She stopped at the old chapel first. Its door was half off its hinges, creaking in the wind. Inside, the air was stale and wet. The cross on the far wall had fallen, resting crooked on the floorboards. Anna aimed her camera and began recording. "This is the place," she whispered, her voice trembling. "This is where it began, and where it always comes back." As she spoke, the wind outside stilled for just a moment, so abruptly that it made her chest tighten. Then, from the lake's direction, she heard it, a faint sound, not thunder, not rain, something like a child humming. Her hands began to shake. She turned toward the noise and stepped back out into the storm. The lake shimmered faintly through the trees, catching flashes of lightning like a mirror alive. Each flash revealed something different: trees bending, water rippling, shadows moving along the dock. When she reached the shoreline, the air felt thick and electric. Her flashlight caught something in the distance, someone standing on the dock. The figure was small, motionless, back turned. For a moment, Anna couldn't breathe. "Eli." The name left her lips before she could stop it. The figure didn't move. She took a step closer, her boots sinking into the mud. "It's okay," she said softly, her voice trembling with disbelief. "You don't have to hide anymore." The figure turned slowly. Lightning flashed, and for an instant she saw him. The same boy from the photo, the same boy from the tape. His skin pale, clothes soaked, eyes reflecting the lightning like glass. But what struck her most was his expression. It wasn't empty anymore. It was pleading. He opened his mouth, and though the wind drowned almost everything, she heard one word: remember. The world seemed to tilt. The rain fell harder. Anna stumbled forward, her camera jerking in her hand. "I do remember," she whispered. "I found you. I found the truth." But the boy only shook his head, slowly, sorrowfully, as though she'd misunderstood entirely. Then he turned and walked backward toward the edge of the dock, one step, then another, until the water swallowed him whole without a splash. The storm broke into chaos. Lightning tore across the sky, thunder so loud it rattled her bones. Anna screamed his name, running forward, but the dock, slick and old, gave way beneath her. She crashed hard against the boards, breath knocked out of her. Her flashlight tumbled into the water. When she pulled herself up, gasping, she saw her camera had landed beside her, still recording. In its small digital screen, she could see her own reflection in the black water, and behind her reflection, a faint second shape, the boy, standing perfectly still. She turned around. Nothing there. Heart hammering, she whispered, "What do you want from me?" The wind rose again, and this time, the voice that answered wasn't a whisper. It was layered, overlapping, as if coming from the water itself. "You look too long." Anna staggered back, shaking her head. No, I was just trying to help. You saw us." The lake began to ripple violently. Bubbles broke the surface, forming a perfect ring of motion around where the boy had vanished. The air grew colder, so cold that her breath turned to mist. Her camera flickered, its image distorting. The voices deepened, more layered now, like dozens of children speaking at once, all murmuring the same word over and over: remember. She fell to her knees, clutching the camera to her chest, tears mixing with rain. "I do remember," she cried. "I remember all of you." The water calmed instantly. The wind stopped. The forest held its breath. For a moment, silence blanketed everything. Then from the lake surface, a hand rose, small, pale, dripping. It reached toward her, trembling slightly, not menacing but almost hopeful. Anna reached back without thinking, fingertips brushing the cold air between them. The camera slipped from her hand, hitting the dock with a sharp crack. In that instant, she felt it, not fear but sorrow, an overwhelming flood of grief that didn't belong to her. Hundreds of years of loss, of names forgotten, of voices erased by time. The boy wasn't asking to be freed. He was asking not to be alone. Her vision blurred. The lake reflected the lightning again, and for the briefest second, she saw countless faces beneath the surface. Children, men, women, all watching her. Their expressions weren't angry. They were waiting. The storm began to fade as quickly as it had come. The rain softened. The water grew still once more. Anna stood, shaking, drenched, staring at the place where the hand had been. There was nothing now, no ripples, no sound, no trace. She picked up the camera, its screen cracked but still glowing faintly. On the display was a new image, a single frame of her standing at the dock. The boy behind her, smiling faintly. Her breath caught in her throat. When she blinked, the image disappeared, replaced by the recording's timestamp. October 12, 2016, 11:59 p.m. But as she watched, the numbers began to flicker. Slowly, impossibly, they changed. August 14th, 1991. The camera powered down. Anna stood there, drenched and shivering, feeling the quiet of the forest close in around her. The lake's surface rippled once, then stilled. Somewhere deep beneath it, something shifted like a sigh. She whispered to the darkness, "I see you." And this time, from far out across the water, a faint echo came back, her own voice, repeating softly, "I see you too." The wind picked up again, brushing her hair across her face, but it wasn't cold anymore. It felt almost gentle, like the breath of something ancient finally at peace. As she turned to leave, lightning flashed one final time. The lake glowed briefly, silver and still, and for the briefest heartbeat, there were two figures reflected in it, a woman and a boy, standing side by side, both looking toward the shore. Then the light was gone and the storm, at last, passed over Pine County. The next morning broke pale and hollow. Mist clung to the trees like gauze, and the air carried that uncanny stillness that comes only after a violent storm, too quiet, too clean, as if the world itself was trying to forget what had happened. Anna woke on the floor of her motel room, still in damp clothes, her hands trembling, her mind caught between dream and memory. Her first instinct was to reach for the camera. It was lying beside her on the carpet, cracked and mud-stained, the lens smudged with water. She turned it on. The screen flickered weakly, then stabilized, but all the files were gone. Every photo, every frame of video, erased. Only one remained, listed as IMG_000. She opened it with shaking fingers. It was a photograph, the same one from 1991, the one that had started everything. Except now, the boy wasn't there. The group of campers stood smiling by the lake, but where the boy had once been, there was only empty space, just trees and water. Even the shadows had changed. The light looked wrong, flat, as if that piece of the image had been repainted by something that didn't understand sunlight. Her chest tightened. "No," she whispered. "No, you were here." She replayed the events of the night again and again in her mind. The storm, the dock, the hand reaching from the water, the voice that had echoed hers. Had it happened at all? Or had she fallen asleep by the lake, hallucinating in exhaustion and grief? But the mud still caked her shoes. Her camera was still broken, and she could still feel the cold on her skin, the kind of cold that came from something deeper than air. Anna opened her laptop, desperate to recover what she'd lost. She reconnected the camera, ran data recovery software, scrolled through every corrupted file. Most returned blank, fragmented, or unreadable. But one thumbnail loaded, a still frame of the lake, taken during the storm. She enlarged it slowly, expecting to see nothing. Instead, she saw herself. She was standing on the dock, her face pale and drawn. Behind her, barely visible in the shadows, was the boy. But not the same boy, not the same expression. He was smiling, a faint, almost human smile, soft and tired, like someone who had finally been heard. Then, before her eyes, the image flickered and vanished. The file deleted itself. Anna sat back, her pulse heavy in her ears. The silence in the room was suffocating. The air felt different now, charged with something invisible, an aftertaste of the uncanny, lingering even after the proof was gone. She closed the laptop and whispered, "I saw you. I remember you." It was all she could offer, and somehow she hoped it was enough. In the days that followed, she tried to return to her life. She went back to Auburn, resumed her research, answered the questions of her advisor with vague phrases about lost data and field exhaustion. She told no one the truth. Who would believe it? Who would understand that a photograph could breathe, could change, could erase itself? But something inside her had shifted permanently. The world no longer felt solid. Mirrors unsettled her. Reflections in windows caught her off guard. She started noticing patterns in light, ripples of movement at the edge of vision, like sunlight playing across water even when no water was near. The photograph became an online curiosity. The Historical Society published a digital archive of the Camp Everpine collection, including her scans. Within a week, the images went viral. Thousands of people viewed the group photo, pointing out eerie details, claiming they saw faces in the trees, eyes in the water. But soon after, the file corrupted on the server. When re-uploaded, the mysterious boy was gone from every version. Viewers who had saved copies swore he had been there. Some even shared screenshots. But those screenshots also vanished from devices, deleted, replaced with blank gray boxes labeled missing file. A strange bug, the tech team said. Nothing supernatural. Still, rumors spread. Forums filled with theories. That the photo was cursed, that the file deleted itself to protect the living, that it was part of some unsolved government cover-up. But beneath the noise, a quieter story began to form. One, a researcher who disappeared for 3 days during a storm and returned changed, whispering about a boy in the lake who never existed. Anna stayed silent. She tried to ignore the online chaos, tried to bury herself in work. Yet, late at night, when the campus halls were empty and the world was quiet, she would sometimes hear faint water sounds through her computer speakers, even when no programs were open. A soft lapping, rhythmic and slow, like waves brushing against wood. Once, unable to resist, she opened the archive folder again. To her astonishment, there was a new file, one she hadn't placed there. It was blank, unnamed, showing only a faint ripple pattern across its thumbnail. She hovered her mouse over it, and a chill ran through her hand. The date of creation read August 14th, 1991. She didn't open it. She just sat there, staring, until the screen went black. Days passed. The file disappeared again, replaced by nothing but a faint watermark in the corner of her desktop, a shadow of something that used to be. The story began to fade from the public eye. People moved on, the same way they always do. The digital storm of fascination calmed into memory, and the photograph, once infamous, became just another ghost of the internet, spoken of but never seen. Yet for Anna, forgetting wasn't possible. Sometimes, when walking across campus, she'd glimpse children playing near the university pond. For a fleeting second, one of them would look up and meet her eyes, and the world would blur just slightly, the air around them humming faintly, like the edge of an old television signal. Then they'd vanish back into the crowd, laughter echoing faintly like an echo across time. The haunting wasn't in the photograph anymore. It was in her. Because some images don't fade. They change the light inside you. And though she never spoke it aloud, Anna began to understand what the boy had meant when he said remember. It wasn't a plea for justice or closure. It was a request for presence, for existence itself. He had been forgotten once, erased by silence and time. She had made him visible again, even if only for a moment. That was enough. Now, every time she closed her eyes, she saw the lake, still and endless, reflecting the sky. And sometimes when she blinked, she could almost see a ripple move across its surface, as though something beneath was turning over in sleep. Not gone, just resting. And in that silence, she realized that remembering is not the same as holding on. It's letting what was lost live freely again, in memory, in story, in light. The photograph nobody noticed had finally disappeared. But the truth it carried remained, shimmering just beneath the surface of time, like a reflection waiting for someone brave or foolish enough to look again. The lake was quiet again, wrapped in the soft breath of evening. Anna stood at its edge, the trees' dark silhouettes against a fading orange sky. In her hands, she held the final copy of the photograph, the one where the boy was gone, the one the world decided was real. She knelt and placed it on the surface of the water. For a moment it floated, catching the dim light, then slowly began to sink, ripples spreading outward in widening circles. She whispered, "You can rest now," her voice trembling just enough to betray how long she'd carried the weight of the story. The forest seemed to listen. The air around her shifted, warm, then cold, then still again, as the photo vanished beneath the surface. Something flickered in the water's reflection. Two faint shapes appeared, one small, one tall, standing side by side as if watching her. They didn't move, didn't speak, but she felt it deep inside her chest. Gratitude. Tears filled her eyes, but she smiled through them. The wind stirred gently, carrying the scent of pine and rain. She turned to leave, the world quiet except for the soft sound of the lake breathing behind her. When she reached the tree line, she looked back one last time. The surface was smooth, calm, endless. And though the figures were gone, the reflection of the sky shimmered like memory itself. Beautiful, heavy, eternal. For the first time, the silence didn't feel haunted. It felt whole,